two things are wrong before you write a line of code. The first is the word. Swagger is not a specification anymore. It has not been since 2015. The specification is called OpenAPI. Swagger is now just a set of tools around it: Swagger UI, Swagger Editor, Swagger CodeEngine. So when an interviewer asks, "Do you use Swagger?" the sharp answer is, we expose an OpenAPI 3 document and serve Swagger UI on top of it. That sentence alone puts you ahead of most candidates, because it shows you know the spec and the tool are different things. The second problem is worse, and it is costing people entire afternoons right now. The library at the top of every search result, SpringFox, is effectively dead. Its last meaningful release was years ago. It does not properly support Spring Boot 3. It does not support OpenAPI 3 well, and on a modern Spring Boot it will fail at startup with an error that tells you nothing useful about the real cause. People are still following those tutorials, hitting a null pointer exception deep inside a library that has not been touched since 2020, and concluding that they have done something wrong. They have not. The library is dead. The answer is Spring Doc OpenAPI. 9 concepts: what the spec actually is, how to generate it properly, the argument that actually matters, code first versus contract first, and how to stop your documentation quietly lying to you, which it will. Here is the real problem, and it is not really about tooling. Documentation written by hand goes stale. Not might, will. Someone adds a field, ships it, and does not update the wiki page. Someone changes a status code from 200 to 201. Someone deprecates an endpoint and the docs still show it. 6 months later the documentation is a work of fiction, and, this is the important part, it is worse than having no documentation at all. Because a consumer who has no docs will ask you. A consumer who has wrong docs will build against them, ship, and fail in production, and they will be certain the bug is yours, and they will be reasonable to think so, because you gave them the wrong map. The insight behind OpenAPI is, do not write the documentation. Generate it from the code that actually runs. Your controller declares that it returns a customer, and it takes a page parameter, and it can return 4 or 4. That is the contract. It is already there, in the types. So read it out of the code, and the docs cannot drift, because they are derived from the thing that is true. But, and every honest engineer needs to hear this, generation buys you structure for free. It does not buy you meaning. The generator can tell the world that this endpoint takes a string call status. It cannot tell them which values are legal, or what happens when the order is already shipped, or that this call is not idempotent. That part is still your job, and it is a part everybody skips. First up, what an OpenAPI document actually is. Strip away the tooling and an OpenAPI document is one JSON or YAML file that describes your entire API in a machine-readable way. Its top-level sections are worth knowing by name: info, title, version, description. Servers, the base URLs, so a client knows where staging is versus production. Paths, every endpoint, every method, and for each one the parameters, the request body, and every possible response with its status code. Components, the reusable pieces, schemas, which are your DTOs, security schemes, shared parameters. And security, applied globally or per operation. That is it. Now, why does it matter that it is machine readable? Because that one file is not just for humans. From it you can generate a client SDK in any language, so your consumers do not handwrite HTTP calls. You can generate server stubs. You can drive contract tests. You can diff 2 versions in CI and fail the build on a breaking change, and that last one is the most valuable thing on this list, and almost nobody does it. You can import it into Postman or Insomnia. And you can render Swagger UI from it. Swagger UI is the pretty page everyone thinks of as Swagger, and it is genuinely the least interesting thing you can do with the document. The document is an API contract that a machine can read. The pretty page is a side effect. Next up, the library, and why the other one will hurt you. Spring Doc Open API is the library. Add one starter and you get three things immediately. It scans your controllers, it generates the opened API document at /v3/API docs, and it serves Swagger UI at /swaggerui.html. Zero configuration and zero annotations to start. And it understands modern Spring properly, Webflux as well as MVC, Spring Security, Spring Data Pageable, Kotlin, and Java Records, which Spring Fox never did. If you are migrating from Spring Fox, the mapping is mechanical and you can do it in an afternoon. The API annotation becomes tag. API operation becomes operation. API param becomes parameter. API model property becomes schema. And crucially, the package changes. You are moving from io.swagger.annotations to io.swagger.v3.os.annotations. That v3 is the tail. It is the Open API 3 annotation set. And here is a practical warning that will save you an hour. So remember it. Do not have both libraries on the class path at once. They both try to register handlers for the same paths, and the failure is confusing, a startup error, or worse, a Swagger UI that renders but is silently empty, and you will assume you configured something wrong. You did not. Remove Spring Fox entirely. Delete the dependency, delete the config class, delete the docket bean. Docket does not exist in Spring Doc, and that is the first thing that will break. Clean removal, then add Spring Doc. Moving on to the third one. Annotate the meaning, not the mechanics. The single most common mistake is annotating things the framework can already see. This is noise, and it is worse than noise. It is a lie waiting to happen. If your method signature already says it takes a long ID and returns a customer, then adding an annotation that says takes a long ID, returns a customer adds nothing, and it will go stale the moment someone changes the signature and forgets the annotation. You have handwritten documentation again, just with extra steps. Annotate what the code cannot say. What are the legal values of this status parameter? The code says string, but only 3 strings are valid. What does a 409 actually mean here? The code says it can return 1, but not that it means the order was already shipped. What does this endpoint do in business terms? That a post to /order/id/cancel is idempotent, but /refund is not, and calling it twice refunds twice. That is the information a consumer needs, and it exists nowhere in your type system. So, use operation with a summary and a description for meaning. Use API responses to name what each status code means. Use schema on your DTO fields for constraints, examples and format. And here is the free win almost nobody takes. Spring Doc reads your Jakarta bean validation annotations. Not nil, size, pattern, min and max are already in your DTOs. Spring Doc turns them straight into schema constraints, so your validation and your documentation cannot disagree. One source of truth. That is the whole idea, applied properly. Number 4. Author the docs, and the endpoint you must not ship. 2 problems, and the second one is a genuine security incident. First, describing your auth. Declare a security scheme, mirror with a JWT format, or an OAuth to flow, and reference it on your operations. Now Swagger UI shows an authorize button, A consumer can paste a token and actually try the endpoint, and your generated client SDKs know how to send credentials. Without it, every consumer has to be told how to authenticate, out of band, in an email, which is exactly the undocumented tribal knowledge you were trying to eliminate. Second, and please hear this one, your Swagger UI and your API docs endpoint are, by default, public. Think about what that means. You have just published, to anyone who asks, a complete machine-readable map of every endpoint you have, including the internal ones, including /admin/users, including the exact shape of every request body. That is a gift to anyone probing you. It tells an attacker precisely where to aim, and it saves them the entire reconnaissance phase. So, in production, either disable it, springdoc.apidocs.enabled equals false, or put it behind authentication, or expose it only on an internal management port that is not routed from the internet. And to be fair, there is a legitimate counterargument. For a genuinely public API, like Stripes, you want the document public. That is the point. It is your product's front door. So the rule is not always hide it. The rule is decide. The failure is not exposing it. The failure is exposing it because nobody ever thought about it, which is what happens by default. Number 5. The argument that actually matters. This is the only genuinely interesting design question in this whole topic, and it is the one an interviewer will use to find out whether you have thought about APIs or merely used them. Code first, you write Java, the document is generated from it. That is what Spring Doc does. It is fast, it cannot drift from the implementation, and it needs no extra process. And the argument against it is real. Your API is now an accident of your implementation. Your DTO leaks your entity. Your field is named custom because that is what the database column is called. Your API evolves by whoever happened to touch the controller last. Nobody designed it. Contract first. You write the Open API YAML first. You design the API as a deliberate artifact, review it, agree it with your consumers, and then generate server interfaces from it and implement them. The document is the source of truth, and the compiler enforces that your code matches. Front-end and back-end can work in parallel from day one, against a mock generated from the same file. Now, which is right? Code first, for an internal API where you own both sides and can change it on Friday. The overhead of contract first buys you nothing when you can just refactor both ends. Contract first, for a public API, or one crossing a team boundary, or anything with real versioning obligations. And the reason is not process purity, it is this. A code-first public API is one careless refactor away from a breaking change that you ship without noticing, because nothing in your build knows the contract was supposed to be stable. Which brings us to the thing that fixes it. Number 6. The one thing that makes any of this worth doing. This is the most valuable idea in the episode, and it is the one almost nobody does. So if you take one thing away, take this. You have a machine-readable contract. Use it as one. In CI, generate the Open API document from the branch, compare it to the document on main, and if the diff contains a breaking change, fail the build. Tools like OpenAPI Diff do exactly this. What counts as breaking? Removing an endpoint. Removing a response field a consumer might read. Adding a required request field, which is the one people always miss, because adding sounds additive and safe, and it is not. Every existing client instantly becomes invalid. Narrowing a type. Changing a status code. Tightening a validation rule, a size max of 100 becoming 50 is a breaking change, and it will look like a harmless one-character diff in review. What is not breaking? Adding an optional request field. Adding a response field. Adding a whole new endpoint. Now think about what this gives you. Without it, you find out you broke a consumer when the consumer breaks in production and they find you. With it, you find out in a pull request in 90 seconds before it exists. And notice this is the thing that resolves the previous concept. With a diff gate in CI, code first becomes safe for a public API because the machine is now enforcing the contract that contract first would have enforced by process. That is a genuinely good answer to give an interviewer because it shows you can get the benefit of a discipline without paying its whole cost. 7. The payoff and the trap in it. Every consumer of your API is, right now, handwriting HTTP calls, building URLs with string concatenation, hand mapping JSON to objects, and getting a field name subtly wrong that will surface as a null in production 3 weeks from now. All of that is generated code that nobody generated. Point open API generator at your document and it will emit a typed client, Java, TypeScript, Python, Go, a dozen more, with the models, the methods and the error types. Now a breaking change in your API becomes a compile error in your consumer at build time rather than a 500 at 3 in the morning. That is a genuinely large win and it is why the whole exercise is worth it. The trap. Generated code is only as good as your document. If your schemas are vague, if half your fields are typed as object because you never annotated them, if your responses are undeclared, if you never said which fields are required, then the generated client is vague too, full of objects and nullable everything, and it is worse than handwritten code because now it is generated garbage that nobody feels ownership of, and nobody wants to touch. So do not generate clients until your document is genuinely good. And the honest caveat, for a small internal API where you own both sides, a handwritten client with a couple of records may be simpler than a built-in code generation step that everyone has to learn and maintain. Generation earns its keep at scale, many consumers, many languages, a real versioning contract. Not for 2 services and 1 team. 2 to go. Number 8. The reality. 6 things, quickly. 1. The empty Swagger UI. It renders, it is blank, and nothing in the logs explains it. Usually your controllers are in a package Spring Doc is not scanning, or a security filter is blocking the API docs path. And notice the UI is asking for that path over HTTP like anything else, so if Spring Security blocks it, the page comes up empty and says nothing. 2. Spring Security hiding your endpoints. You must explicitly permit the Swagger UI and V3 API docs paths, or you get that blank page. 3. DTOs versus entities. If you annotate your JPA entities and expose them directly, you have just published your database schema as your public API, lazy loading proxies, internal columns and all, and now you cannot rename a column without a breaking API change. Use DTOs. This is the open API-shaped consequence of a mistake you already should not be making. 4. Generic types. Your response entity of API response of list of customer will produce a schema so unhelpful it is misleading, and you need explicit schema annotations to rescue it. 5. Examples. Spring Doc generates a syntactically valid but semantically meaningless example, a string called string, a date of 1970. Nobody can use that. Provide real examples. It costs a minute and it is the difference between a document a consumer can act on and one they have to ask you about. And 6. Versioning. Spring Doc will happily generate one document with /v1 and /v2 endpoints jumbled together. Use Group OpenAPI to split them, or your consumers cannot tell which API they are even reading. And finally, number 9. What separates the answers? Most candidates, asked about Swagger, say, we add the dependency and it gives us a UI. That is a junior answer, and it is the answer the interview expects. Here is what a strong one sounds like. Get the vocabulary right. OpenAPI is the specification, Swagger is the tooling, and Spring Doc is the library. Spring Fox is dead and will not run on Spring Boot 3. Then show that you know what the document is for. It is a machine-readable contract, and the pretty page is the least valuable thing you can do with it. Then give them the practice that proves you have shipped an API someone else depended on. I diff the OpenAPI document in CI and failed the build on a breaking change, because otherwise you learn you broke a consumer when the consumer breaks. Then show judgment on the design question. Code first for internal APIs where I own both ends. Contract first when the API crosses a team boundary or has versioning obligations. And with a diff gate in CI, code first becomes safe for both. Then the security instinct, which almost nobody volunteers. I make sure the API docs endpoint is not publicly exposed in production, unless it is deliberately a public API. Publishing a complete map of your internal endpoints is a gift to an attacker. And finally, the honesty that lands. Generation gives you structure for free, but it does not give you meaning. The generator cannot tell a consumer that calling refund twice refunds twice. That part is still writing, and it is still your job. Say that, and you have demonstrated something the annotations never could. Let us pull it together. The words matter. OpenAPI is the specification, Swagger is the tooling, and if the library you found is Spring Fox, close the tab, it is dead, it will not run on Spring Boot 3, and the error it gives you will not tell you that. Spring Doc OpenAPI is the answer, and the migration is an afternoon. Handwritten docs go stale, and stale docs are worse than none, because a consumer with the wrong map will build against it and blame you correctly. So generate. But remember what generation actually buys you: structure, for free. Not meaning. The types cannot say that a 409 means the order already shipped, or that refund is not idempotent, so annotate the meaning, and stop restating the mechanics. Let bean validation feed your schema so your validation and your docs cannot disagree. Decide, deliberately, whether that API docs endpoint should be public, because by default it is, and you have published a map of every internal endpoint you own. Code first for internal, contract first across a boundary, and diff the document in CI and fail the build on a breaking change, which is the single highest value thing in this episode and the thing almost nobody does. Do that, and your documentation stops being a work of fiction. Subscribe.